It's Tracy Malone from NarcissistAbuseSupport.com. I will be talking about narcissist abuse today with my friend Wendy Behary. Wendy Behary is the author of Disarming the Narcissist, her third edition, and it's like on the Oprah list of the top books for narcissism. She's brilliant, and we're going to be talking today about the layer of narcissism and how it fuels into sex addiction, porn addiction, estrangement, alienation, and coercive control. Those are all by themselves types of abuse. People don't have to be a narcissist to use coercive control. But when coercive control is used in combination with someone who is narcissist, things are different. Things get escalated and it's not going to be pretty, right? Their self-centeredness and their lack of empathy and their need for control change all of these different types of abuse with a layer of narcissism. So let's go meet Wendy and we're going to have a great discussion, and I'll see you on the other side. Welcome, Wendy. Thank you so much for joining me.
Tracy, it's such a pleasure to be with you again.
We were talking a few weeks ago about a topic, and to me, as we came into this, all the different aspects of abuse, from sexual abuse to porn addiction to estrangement to coercive control, it all falls under the umbrella, or it gets more complicated, right? It's not always under the umbrella. You could certainly have a sexual abuser that isn't a narcissist.
Right.
They are a narcissist. It's much more complicated, right?
Yes. Yes, indeed. It's what I call the layer of narcissism, that when you add that extra layer to the mix, whether it is any of the things that you've already mentioned and more, that you have the challenge of high entitlement, low empathy. And that always makes it difficult because there's always denial in these types of addictions and problems, but with narcissism it's a denial that it's immediately followed by justifications, defense, dismissiveness, blaming, and what's the big deal, I'm entitled to it anyway, and why are we being so sensitive to this, and where's your sense of humor? So you'll get a lot of that devaluation as well, and almost no empathy for the impact this is having on the person who's really been afflicted by the problem.
And their control and their need for the self-centeredness. This is what complicates, again, not that any abuser's normal, right? But when you have that layer of that entitlement, like you said, where it's about controlling someone. So when we think about something like sex addiction, right? The sex addiction all by itself, is about power and control. But with a narcissist, the way that they hurt the person is even more dangerous, right? They see that dominance over them. They make them feel less than. It's your fault that I'm a sex addict. If you had only. So there's all that extra mix that complicates the way that the victim goes through that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's this, what's really hard about it with narcissism is it becomes, narcissism itself are a little collection of modes, if you will, or states of mind, ways of being, right?
Mhm.
That become constructed as a form of survival, as a form of coping. And I mean, this is what narcissism is. So you have one stance, which is very overcompensating and bullying and attacking and critical and entitled and showing off. You have another stance, which is completely detached and dismissive and disappearing and, and moving into a state of self-soothing, self-stimulation. And that's where some of these things like financial infidelity and sex addiction become highly problematic, because it's not just that they've fallen into it, it's that it's really a part of their way of survival. And then it takes on a life of its own and it becomes this kind of hypersexual narcissism. And as you said, it's not always about control, but it's often about my way, I'm entitled, a certain self-righteous justification to
Mhm.
these behaviors just because, but without a full-on awareness or consciousness even. it's all in the spirit of preserving and protecting their own ego. And so when, when you're busy protecting yourself, you have little room to appreciate what's happening on the other side to the person who's receiving this behavior.
Mhm. For sure. And again, I think, this entitlement to instant gratification, and this goes into porn and sexual, kind of addiction sort of situation, but it's going to make the victim feel 100 times more worse because of the gaslighting, because the blaming, sort of the Darvo, like, this is your fault that I'm doing this, and all of it comes in, and how does it affect the victim differently if they weren't?
I think, as you said, when it's not narcissism, it still is very painful to be a victim of betrayal trauma.
Mhm.
It's still very painful to find out that this person who was supposed to be your safety, your protector, your refuge, your sanctuary, is no longer that person. They've betrayed, they've crossed a line of trust, they've violated an agreement without your consent. It hurts enough to be in that situation. But then to add what you just described, which comes with narcissism, which is all the kind of toxic manipulation. Well, if you were only taking care of yourself, well, if, once they're found out, because they'll spend a lot of time denying it, even though the evidence is crystal clear. But once there's no more room to hide, then it's, well, if you just were more attentive, or if you just cared more, how many times did I tell you that this would happen if? And you have a victim who's now not only dealing with this complete incredulous shock to the system, but also, and nowhere to turn for safety, at least not within the usual sanctuary when you suffer trauma. But now they're also starting to go, maybe it is me. Maybe I wasn't showing up enough. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I didn't have a sense of humor. Maybe I don't take care of myself. Maybe I have gained weight. Maybe I'm not a very sexual person. And now all of a sudden, all this doubt turns into potential self blame.
Mhm.
And before you know it, and you know this well too from your communities, you have women mostly, men too at times, but women mostly who are saying, I caused this.
Mhm.
I caused this to happen.
Mhm.
This is my fault and only I can fix it. And oh my gosh, now they're scrambling to try to fix it
Mhm. Yeah,
in the midst of betrayal and trauma.
absolutely, because it's that believing portion, right?
Yes.
Can't be them, has to be, you. And
Mhm.
so therefore all of those things ruminate through your head. You're not only hearing the voices in your own head, you're hearing the narcissist, if you had only, if you had. And so that fuels that self-doubt
Mhm.
and makes you feel terrible that your spouse or partner is off with someone else, or you can't satisfy them because they've been putting that in your head, instead of going,
Yes.
wait, there's something wrong with them, that,
Yes.
instead of looking at them, this points it back to the victim. And I think that's the unique part here with the narcissist.
That's the really tough part. I mean, I just finished a call today with a beautiful, bold, bright, amazing group of women, many of whom have suffered betrayal in relationship to a narcissist. Uh, Many who are suffering other issues with narcissists in their lives, but all of them who have been through moments of this enormous self doubt, self blame, self wonder, if you will, about what part they've played, about how they can fix it, about what to do next. They've internalized the voice of the narcissist. It's like the old haunting melody that keeps playing. And if they come into the relationship with the narcissist already with some stuff from once upon a time, maybe an internalized mother or father or teacher or coach who was also telling them, basically, you're not worth it or it's your fault,
Mhm.
then you've got that double whammy. It just feels all too familiar and it becomes harder to penetrate that, with reasoning. Not impossible, we can do it, but it becomes harder to get there.
Yeah. And it taps into, if you've got that root of family of origin stuff,
Mhm.
and those I'm not good enough recordings, then they're tapping into the poison for you, right?
Mhm.
The poison is they know exactly that that's one of your triggers, and they're going to make you feel terrible about it and perpetuate the lie, perpetuate the pain, because they have that little insight about you that you have this sensitivity to whatever happened with your parents, and then they can just poke at the wound, pour vinegar in it, and you comply because you're like, well, maybe that does make sense. I am sensitive, or whatever the thing is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and working with narcissists, which I do on the other side of the chair, I work with the narcissists themselves. And it's a rare opportunity since most people don't want to work with them. But, when they are willing to do the work, or at least I have them, sustained in the chair because they're terrified of losing their relationship or losing their facade. It's an opportunity to be able to see what drives this, what actually causes this whole chain of reactions and actions on their part. And it's so often it's not the, ooh, let me see how I can hurt you. It's the, I'm going to do what I want because, that's what I was taught. Like, I do great things. I get to do what I want. And you're not like paying homage to me, then that's on you. And I'm going to preserve my ego at all costs. Like, I don't really want to hurt my partner, Wendy. Don't get me wrong. It's not about her. But you know what? If she gets hurt, then she has to figure out like what she did to cause that. Right. So it's not like I'm trying to hurt my partner. It's just, they do know what it takes to kind of maintain control. They see the vulnerability and they're not deviantly trying to get at it. There's this kind of unconscious sense of, this is my way to take care of me. This is how I take care of me. I preserve my spot. I get to have my cake and eat it too. Nothing gets rattled until it does. And then everything falls apart. And they're angry and upset. And then they try manipulation and domination and gaslighting and all of it until they might land in therapy, until there might be a chance.
Oh, they'll land in therapy with you for sure. I want to move on to the estrangement category. And this is like the ultimate silent treatment for parents whose adult children have decided to walk away from them. And this is also, it's followed with the discard and the devaluation kind of things that happen to the parents. So how is this affected by the layer of narcissism?
Yeah, in two ways, because you can look at both sides of estrangement, right? So on the one hand, you have people, and I think you talk about this too, you have individuals who have grown up in a home where there were narcissistic parent or parents. And they have spent a lifetime trying to figure out how to navigate those relationships, how to please, how to appease, how to step away, how to set limits. They've done everything to try to respectfully sustain the relationship to some degree because it's a parent, it's a family member, it might be a sibling even. And it's come at a high price. So what's happening is their health and wellness is really in jeopardy. They can no longer really be in the face of this person because it just kind of tears down that resilience and everything that they've been doing to try to build themselves into a place of health, and make the decision ultimately that they have to cut ties. They have to go no contact, basically. They have to estrange themselves in order to preserve their own sense of wellness. It's a painful, challenging, and difficult decision to make, but sometimes it's the only way. And it may be temporary. It may be like pressing a pause button as opposed to an eject button, but it's still something that needs to be done until they feel they have the strength to maybe experiment again, or maybe not. So that's one side of it, because the narcissist is just unyielding. So, difficult parents and meshing, suffocating parents are one thing, but with that layer of narcissism and all that entitlement, all that demeaning, debasing, devaluing behavior that comes from the narcissist, all the shoulds, the demands, the criticisms, it's the toxic shame that gets applied. It's too much for most people to bear. And so sometimes it comes down to no contact. We know that partners sometimes have to do this in relationships, but certainly it happens in families as well. And then on the other side of the coin, you have, the family that's decided to estrange themselves from the narcissist. Same reasons, that it's just become too destabilizing for the whole family system
Mhm.
and the narcissists themselves, whether it's they are now doing things that have become really dangerous for the family, putting the family in peril, whether it's financially or emotionally or all of the above, that there needs to be a cutoff point. Um, a kind of tough love, you might say, but with the hope that it can raise the bar, raise the consequences enough to inspire the narcissist to get help.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a third bucket.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned the adult child of a
Yes.
narcissist, which
Yes.
most advice is save yourself, right? Get away, do what you have to do. And then the other side is the family saying goodbye to a narcissist. But there's also the in-laws, when you
Mhm.
have a very healthy family structure close to your children, and then your child marries a narcissist, male or female, right? This
Mhm.
is a whole like sequitur of people that are really being deeply affected by it. Because if you think about it, what happens with a narcissistic daughter or son-in-law is they start to rewrite history. They
Yes.
start to tell your child, oh, that was abuse. Oh, they're passive aggressive. Oh, they don't respect your boundaries, and it becomes this poison, rewriting what really happened, with
Yes.
a little fleck of truth, but not necessarily an evil truth. Like, yeah, maybe they said that, but they didn't mean it in that way. And yet it gets turned into that because the narcissistic, daughter or son-in-law is turning it themselves into the victim of you. Right? That's part of the game, right? They are sitting here building this whole thing going, well, look at you. Your mom's a thing, and then she's mean to me too. You have to protect me. And so that, perpetuates this horrible thing. Can you talk
Yeah.
to that situation?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a great example of something you and I were talking about around coercive control. And
Uh-huh.
I just finished writing an article on this very topic with a very similar example to what you just did. That's coming out soon. And it's actually a case study, but it happens just like that, where the narcissist has now been able to, over time, successfully chip away at any real good feelings that the partner has had about their family. But they don't like me. How could you care about a family that doesn't like your spouse, that doesn't treat me fairly, that doesn't seem to accept me? They baby you so much. They're holding you back from your own possible success. They're
Mhm.
so needy for you. They're always clamoring. I feel like they're trying to compete with me. Don't they realize that I'm your husband? Like I'm the one who you need to be giving your full on attention to at this point. And here you have a partner who's now thinking, well, maybe I do need to put some distance between myself and my family. And that distance and that gap just widens and widens and widens until there's almost no contact anymore because it's too hard to keep the peace with the narcissist.
Mhm.
They have such an incredibly powerful influence. They make these amazing, seemingly credible, rational statements about this, or seemingly rational,
Mhm.
and they're threatening. There's always that underlying threat that well, yeah, I can basically find someone else,
Mhm.
or you're going to end up on your own, or you want to keep getting taken advantage of by your family. Go ahead. I'm not going to sit around and watch it.
Mhm. And then if there's a baby, there's that extra threat.
Yes.
You give up your family. I don't want your mother near my children. I don't want your father near the children. It's that extra layer of sort of the coercive control. Now it's our child, and I don't want my child with your family. So if you are unlucky enough to have a small child, it's heartbreaking for the grandparents that don't get to see them anymore. But this is how it happens, right? That seed of doubt, that, time they weren't there for your soccer game or whatever it was that you told a story, it just gets, blown up. And again, it's part of the smear campaign. It's part of, just the projection of, oh, poor me, and the victim. There's so many things that layer into that from the narcissistic
Yes.
side that aren't necessarily present in a normal estrangement case, because they can be estranged for a million reasons. It doesn't have to be that somebody's
Right.
turning coercively against you. But in the situation with a narcissist, this is huge. And, they're
And
getting,
it's also huge, Tracy, because if I can just say something to what you just said, because it's so important, it's also huge because there's such a motivational driver that is aimed at keeping the attention on me. I need to be number one. I need to be your full, you have to be my audience. You have to be admiring me. You have to be giving, credence to everything I say and do. I need you in my sight. I need to control this. There's that sense that they need this in order to feel viable and valuable. That's the sad part of what lies beneath all of this with narcissism.
yeah. Yeah, they're so destructive, but this ties, we're talking estrangement, but it also ties into the alienation war that's
Yeah.
going on where parents are turning their children against the other parent.
Mm.
So we speak to that and the layer of narcissism in there.
Yeah, it's a really sad case. I mean, divorce is so hard, as we know. It's hard enough. It's
Mhm.
hard enough to raise children together in a co-parenting, peaceful, cooperative way after divorce, and to help kids to be spared the burdens of blame and responsibility and all of that. But then you add the layer of narcissism, and you have someone who kind of feels entitled to set the terms, change the terms, make the rules, break the rules when it comes to the children. And there's a lot of ouching from the failure of the marriage. Even if they, the narcissist, although it's not usually them, but even if they, the narcissist, are the ones who ended it, I mean, it's usually the partners who sort of come to a conclusion this can't go on. The narcissist is still reeling from the sense of failure. And then there's the payback that
Mhm.
comes, and the payback and the loneliness that lives inside of them can turn into, kids, you know, daddy's so lonely. I wouldn't have chosen this. This wasn't my doing, and all of this turning on the other. I'm using the example because I work mostly with narcissistic men. I know it can go in other directions and with other types of relationships, but this is what I'm most accustomed to. And it's just so hard because, as I said, hard enough being a single parent, raising a child in a divorce situation, and then to have to be doing the double duty of also repairing the damage that comes home when your child has been in the custody of the narcissistic parent who's doing all of this, bad mouthing and martyring around the children. And in addition to everything else they do, like sometimes being the overindulgent, no limits at all, and sometimes being clearly, invisible or criticizing, demanding, and blaming. It's a really chaotic and confusing world for kids.
And it's so difficult for kids to be in that situation, but
Yeah.
when they are faced with the almost cognitive dissonance of the truth and what they're being told by the narcissistic parent. That's
Yeah.
the danger here
Yeah.
is lies and the kid doesn't know who to believe. And there's always that coercive control and the guilt like you were just talking about. My last narcissist used to cry in front of his kid all the time. And all this stuff. And literally his son was like, I had asked him, he ended up coming to live with his father. And I'm like, don't you miss your mom? He goes, yeah, I do. But daddy was always crying. He needed me.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
ended up drinking bleach and trying to kill himself twice. Right.
Mm.
It was so emotional damaging to him to not be allowed to have a relationship with his mom and his sister. So the damage is not only to the parent who is experiencing this,
Right.
deep, deep parts of the child that can never feel whole because they're torn in half like a gingerbread boy by their parents. And
Yeah, that's very well said, and that is the bottom line, isn't it? Like it's the impact on the child at the end of the day. I mean, certainly it's tough on parents. There's no doubt about it that the offended partner who is doing all the cleanup work and repair work is often exhausted. It's a wearying process, but at the end of the day, it's about the child. How do
yeah,
we spare the children from carrying all of the responsibility, carrying the burdens, carrying the self-doubt, carrying this magical idea that they can fix it and make it better? And there's answers to all these questions, right? We can help educate kids without turning them against their parent. We can educate them about narcissism without even using the word narcissism, but just talking about different parts of
Mhm.
the parent. You know,
Yeah.
we spend a lot of time doing this in my co-parenting group, just really teaching parents how you can talk to your child at developmentally appropriate ages and ways of, you know, that part of your mom or your dad, that part of them that sometimes can be a joy to be with and other times can be sometimes confusing or scary or upsetting and distressing for you, right? Different parts, but all in the with the goal of really sparing the child the responsibility for those behaviors
Yeah.
and teaching the child how to be a better advocate for themselves.
And I think there's so many things, teaching them boundaries so that
Yes.
they can, speak up for themselves and not lose their voice like we victims do, right?
Yeah.
When we are with a narcissist. So, empowering them with the wording that was so beautifully said a second ago. I wish you could be like on every one of my calls and help people, because it's amazing advice to sit there and be able to put back your children without attacking the other parent. It's not easy. Yeah,
Mhm.
you're triggered, you're angry, whatever it was. They came home and said you caused the divorce, and you're like, that's not true. You want to fight back, but you have to put the kids' needs and first and take care of them, put their oxygen mask on in this
Yeah.
case, and then
Yeah.
react to the stuff on yourself versus letting them see it, and kind of knowing how to put those pieces back when they say things like that.
And you can cue yourself up. You know, for anyone listening to this who's dealing with this, you can cue yourself up by remembering to start with the question. Right? Start with your curious questions. Your child says, you know, Dad says you caused the divorce. It's you. You wanted it. You weren't happy. You blamed him. You were so tough on him. And you say, sweetheart, what was that like for you to hear that? What was that like? Tell me about that. I'm so glad you're telling me this. That sounds really hard. Well, you know, I'm so mad. Oh, I bet. Tell me about that. Tell me more about that. Did you have a question for me that you wanted to ask me about that? So be interested, curious, validating, empathic, understanding. It's usually they're letting off the steam of frustration of what they're hearing. And ultimately you can clarify it simply by saying, you know, hey, there's that part of dad that I'm sure at times can create some confusion in your heart. And it hurts in your heart to have to hear that. And I know that you don't want to believe what you're hearing. And the truth is that relationships are hard and they're really, I mean, I'm talking about a little kid, right? It's really complicated and grown up people have, you know, challenges and marriage can be tough sometimes. And so we make the best decisions we can to be the healthiest people we can be.
Mhm.
And I'm working hard to be that healthy person and good mom for you. And dad, in his own way, will do what he needs to do to be that for you. I'm so sorry that, you know, he was unable to help you to feel safe today with that information. Right. So it's just, you don't get defensive. Don't defend it. There's nothing to defend. You didn't do anything wrong. Right.
Right.
And help the child at a level where they're actually needing your help. You can even say to your child, that must be so hard. What do you need right now? What do you feel like you really need? I
Mhm.
don't know. I just don't want to hear it anymore. Yeah, I know. I know. It's not something that you should need to be subjected to. I'm so sorry you had to hear that, right? Comfort, compassion, empathy, validation,
Mhm.
lots of soothing.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been amazing. Is there anything else that we missed about the layer of narcissism in all of the different types of abuse? Because we kind of went into coercive control. This is like the cage you can't see.
Yeah.
It's intermingled throughout all of the things that we've discussed. Did I miss
Yes.
anything?
I don't think you did, although I'm sure we'll think of 10 more things after we're done because there's always more in that with the layer of narcissism. You know, there's always more. But I think if the takeaway is one thing, it's this. It's when you have that layer, you're dealing with something very different. It is a different reality. It's a reality that is unfortunately just fused with a high sense of entitlement and a low sense of empathy. And which is different from victims, if you will, or partners of narcissists or family members of narcissists who often have the higher empathy and the much lower entitlement. As I like to say to some of my clients who are dealing with issues of narcissism in their lives, we need to heighten your healthy entitlement, your own sense of self-advocacy, your own voice, so you can hear it a little bit more and not lower your empathy. Empathy is a really beautiful thing, but be careful not to feel so compelled to fix, because then you've gone beyond empathy.
Mhm. Absolutely. Compelled to fix is really the thing with survivors is
Yeah. Yes.
we were chosen because of that particular quality. We like to fix. We'll help anybody, even jerks.
Right. Right.
Well, thank you, Wendy, so much for being here. I will be telling everyone about your book, which is Disarming the Narcissist,
Oh, thank
the
you.
third edition. You want to tell them about it while we've got you on screen?
I'm excited about the book. It's done pretty well. It was chosen by Oprah Daly as a top 5 or 6 book in narcissism. It's the #1 therapist recommended book on narcissism. And so I'm proud of that little book. It's come a long way, and thank you for sharing it with everyone. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm very excited about it. I think everyone should read it. And so we'll put the link down below for anybody. And again, Wendy, thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure, Tracy. Thank you.
I hope you found that interesting. Wendy is one of my few colleagues that I know that work with narcissists. And so her depth of knowledge and her deep understanding of this, and you can see her eloquent words, really help us understand that layer because it's different. And, again, not every abuser is a narcissist, but when there is that layer, it's more complicated. So this is Trace Malone. If you are looking for support, my website, narcissistabusesupport.com, is out there. There's millions and millions of pages of resources for you. And I will see you on the other side. Thank you.